Okay, I have been trying to mess with the lighting now for forever. This is one of the major side effects of trying to film anything in natural light in Vancouver. So I will just go with it. What I'm going to be doing today is the Booktube Newbie tag. The first is, why did I start this channel? The big one is that I really do love to read, but I found last year, for instance, I only read about 22 books, which, given the amount of free time that I have, isn't very many. For tons of people, that would be plenty of books, but for me, I knew that I could have been reading a lot more. So I wanted to get back into reading, and I wanted to get back into discussing reading because that was one of the things that I've always really loved. The second is, what are some fun and unique things that you can bring to Booktube? This is always, I think, the hardest one for anyone to answer. You don't really know what it is that you personally are going to bring. What I can say is that I did a degree in English literature at university. And my specialization, even though you can't really call it that because I wasn't doing a grad degree, was in 19th century American literature, which I actually don't see a lot of on Booktube. So that would be stuff like Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville, Louisa May Alcott, a lot of really, really great authors who, it's not like they're unknown, but I think that in a space like Booktube, it would be really fun to look at some of the classics of the 19th century from the United States or even Canada, if that exists, and explore that on top of a lot of the amazing British work from that time. So that would be a lot of fun. Number three, what are you most excited about for this new channel? Probably the thing I just mentioned. I really do feel passionately about 19th century American literature. I'm also really big into medieval literature, which is another thing that I think seems probably really inaccessible. But once you get to know it and understand it, it's actually a lot of fun. They played with language a lot. Even the Middle English itself isn't as hard to figure out as you might think. So that would be something, if I could bring that to Booktube, it would be really, really cool to explore further. Again, not that there aren't people who are doing that, but just sort of carving out a bigger corner for that within the community would be great. Okay, so number four, why do you love reading? I don't know, actually. I've had a really strange relationship with this lately. I feel like there's a little bit too much, and maybe it's just the people that I have on like Facebook or Twitter or whatever else. But there's a little bit too much, I think, where people are pretending as though reading is the only hobby that someone should have, or it's the only decent hobby that someone should have. And I totally disagree with that. I mean, I think reading is wonderful, but I think that that can also be quite elitist. If there are people who haven't had necessarily the world's greatest education, or they haven't been taught to love to read, and they do prefer stories told via TV, via radio, via film, then that's equally valid in my mind. I love to read. It's the hobby I love, but it's not something where I feel like people need it drilled into their head as though it's the most important thing in the world. It is really important, and I love it. And I think I do love it because I do like the ability to feel like, unlike something with TV or film, I'm helping to create the story in that, the things that I imagine as I'm reading are part of that creative process. So, when you're imagining a character, you're imagining a scene, you're much more involved with than you are with TV or film. That's my personal theory. I do still love TV and film, but I can definitely privilege reading for that reason, and it is one of the reasons that I love it. Number five, what book or series got you into reading? I have no idea. I was read to from the time I was a baby. I'd always loved reading. It's really, really hard to pinpoint it. If I really, really had to guess, I mean, maybe The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I think that that might have been the first, major book that I read on my own that wasn't a picture book. Another series of things that I really loved are Chris Van Allsburg's children's books. So that would include things that you probably know, like the Polar Express. There's also a book that he did about, I think, helping kids to learn to be eco-friendly. That sounds like it's a real drag, but it was actually really cool. I cannot remember the name of it, but hopefully I'll be able to insert it right around here. But yeah, so those would probably be the big ones. That's the picture book I remember, and then Narnia is kind of the series that I remember really capturing my attention. So number six, what questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? I don't know if this means in terms of advice or terms of things I just want to be able to ask them if I had the opportunity. I think the biggest question would be something like, how do you have the energy to kind of keep making videos or keep making content, or maybe even something like, if you read a book and it's terrible, how often do you feel like you just shouldn't review it because you either don't want to get, flack for the negativity, or you don't want to burn a bridge with a publisher, or, if that's a consideration that you have, anything like that, in terms of, I guess, how honest you feel you can be. Number 7, what challenges do you think starting a Booktube challenge will be the hardest to overcome? Um, I mean, some of the superficial stuff, like I'm not super comfortable looking at a picture of myself as it is. So editing back video can be a little bit daunting, and I've already gone through that once. You start noticing the weirdest stuff. Like I feel like this side of my face, I don't know what the word would be. It's like it's thicker. I don't know. You guys can tell me, but I think it's true. Either way, little stuff like that. Yeah, so the self-consciousness angle is definitely there, but I also think that I think the other big challenge will be figuring out like how to keep creating content. Like I know that when I'm watching YouTube, I'm not necessarily desperate to watch a review, either because I haven't yet read the book and I want to kind of form my own opinion about it first, or because I may not be interested in that particular book, or because, I have read that book, but I've sort of formed my own opinion and it didn't sway me one way or the other massively, so I'm not desperate to hear someone else's opinion about it, if that makes sense. Whereas I do find that I tend to watch a lot of tag videos or collection videos. So whether it's, what are your top 5 dystopian favorites, or what are your top 5 young adult favorites, or your children's favorites, etc. That kind of content I tend to find more interesting, but then I think it's harder to keep coming up with. As opposed to every time you read a book, if you review it, then that's quite an easy exchange in some ways, although, again, it depends how much you actually want to, how much time you want to devote to reviewing. Number 8, when did you start reading? Again, this is a bit of a weird one. So, from what I understand from what my mom told me, was that when I was about 3, I think, I asked to learn to read. And so she tried to enroll me in some kind of like, I think we would call it pre K. I'm originally from California. So I think it would be called pre K, but I don't know what it would be called anywhere else. Anyway, before kindergarten, but it's sort of more than daycare, if that makes sense. You would still do some kind of activities or learning. She tried to enroll me in something like that, and I think they told her that they didn't accept anyone under 4 for something like that. And so she took it upon herself to teach me to read. So I think I learned about 3.5. Because I really, really wanted to read because she read to me a lot. And then reading totally independently, probably not until I was 4.5 or 5, because that it probably spent about a year to a year and a half learning to read and then reading with her. But yeah, probably about 4.5 reading by myself. Number 9, where do you read? Um, Pretty much everywhere now. I used to have a really hard time reading if there was any noise or music or distraction. And then that quickly, once you start living with someone else, I live with my partner. Once you start living with somebody else, it's pretty much non-negotiable. They're always going to be around doing something else, and you just have to get used to the noise. So now I read on the train to work. I'll read on my lunch break at work in a cafe. I read when I come home in my bedroom, on the couch, in our spare reading room once that's ready at the kitchen table. I can't read in cars still. That's something I've never been able to get good at. But otherwise, anytime I have free time, I usually spend it reading now. Number 10, what types of books do you like to read? This is a bit of an open field. I think everybody always says that. For a while there, I was reading quite a bit of young adult fiction when I was a young adult. Now it has broadened a little bit more. I was that annoying person at 17 or 18 who said, I just read the classics. I don't just read the classics anymore, but I do still love them. And so yeah, it's a wide open field, but one thing I'm challenging myself to read more of is Canadian literature because I moved to Canada when I was 7. And had kind of dismissed Canadian literature for the same reason that a lot of people dismiss Canadian literature, including Canadians, because it tends to be quite insular and depressing and about the snow and your marriage and the snow and small towns and the snow. You get it. I mean, in Vancouver, we don't get a lot of snow, so it's also hard to sympathize with the snow. Anyway, so that's pretty much it. I like the classics. I like a lot of modern lit. I like a lot of Kate Atkinson. I just read the first thing I've ever read by Ali Smith, which was How to Be Both, which was amazing. So I'm definitely going to be reading more of her. But yeah, I mean, and I don't have any particular feelings about the race or the gender of an author. I think naturally I tend to be more drawn to female authors, but I think that's also in reaction to the fact that I really love television, but women are still sorely underrepresented there. So if I do want to hear a woman's story, I think it's often easier for me to find that with reading. But if it's a well-written story, then I like it. And that's pretty much it. So that's it. That's it for the questions. Feel free to like if you liked it. If you like a lot of what I'm into and you kind of want to stick around and see what I make next, then feel free to subscribe. And leave me a comment below just about anything you like. If you want to start a discussion, if you wanted to respond to something I said here, if you want to yell at me about Canadian literature. I mean, I'm not wrong. It's all about snow and being depressed, but I will give it a shot this year. But yeah, other than that, thank you again, and I hope to make more stuff for you soon. All right, bye bye.